Someone made a comment. Perhaps it was not even said with malice. Perhaps it was merely a passing observation, a gentle suggestion, or a clumsy joke. But it landed heavily. It felt like a stone dropping into the quiet pond of your mind, and the ripples are still tearing at your peace. You feel a sudden heat rising from your chest, a tightening in your stomach, a bitter cocktail of indignation and profound hurt. You ask yourself, who do they think they are to speak to me in such a manner? Do they not realize who I am? Do they not see the sacrifices I have made, the battles I have fought, the quiet suffering I have endured just to be here? The comment may have been made hours ago. It might have been yesterday, or even a week ago, yet you are still carrying it. You replay the scene in your mind, meticulously reconstructing the dialogue. You imagine the brilliant, cutting responses you should have delivered, the flawless arguments that would have exposed their ignorance and validated your worth. With every mental rehearsal, the indignation flares up anew. A handful of words, lighter than air, has managed to rob you of your sleep, poison your day, and drain your spirit. Why does this happen? Why does a minor critique have the power to dismantle your entire week? Why does a simple disagreement feel like a violent personal attack? Why do you harbor this desperate, unspoken need for the world to constantly recognize your value, your effort, your unique importance? In our modern culture, we have a very comforting narrative for this pain. You probably tell yourself that you are simply highly sensitive. You believe that you feel things more deeply than the average person, that you possess a large, fragile heart, and because you care so profoundly, the callousness of others wounds you more severely. It is a beautiful narrative. It paints you as a beautiful soul navigating a harsh, unfeeling world. But I must share a truth with you today. It is a truth you will likely resist, a truth that might even offend you right now, which ironically will only prove its validity. You're not overly sensitive. You're proud. What you have been calling a deep sensitivity is, in reality, a wounded ego. What you have been labeling a large heart is often just self-centeredness beautifully disguised as a virtue. What you call feeling deeply is very often the agonizing inability to accept that the center of the universe is not located within you. Before you turn away in anger, before you close your heart and tell yourself that I simply do not understand your pain, please listen. I'm exactly like you. We all are. This condition is the universal human ailment. I do not speak to you from a pedestal of moral superiority, but from the shared trenches of human frailty. This is a diagnosis of our shared condition, and it is a diagnosis handed down to us by a man who understood the labyrinth of the human mind better than almost anyone else. A man who lived more than 16 centuries ago, who wrestled with his own towering ego, who tasted the bitter emptiness of pride before he ever found the light of peace. His name was Augustine of Hippo, Saint Augustine. What this ancient African bishop wrote about human pride possesses the power to shatter the illusions that are currently making you miserable. Augustine offered a metaphor that stands as the perfect, devastating diagnosis of our modern psychological crisis. He said that pride is not greatness, it is a swelling, and what is swollen appears large, but it is, in fact, diseased. I want you to sit with that image for a moment. What is swollen appears large. Think of a balloon. You blow air into it, and it expands. It takes up a tremendous amount of space in a room. It demands attention. It looks impressive, colorful, and grand. But what is it really? It is a thin, fragile membrane stretched to its absolute limit, filled with nothing but empty air. It possesses no solid substance. Because it is so inflated, it is in constant, mortal danger. The slightest prick of a tiny pin, a sharp edge, a rough surface will cause it to pop pathetically and violently. This is the exact anatomy of the inflated ego. It masquerades as greatness, but it is merely a swelling. It presents itself as formidable strength, but it is the pinnacle of fragility. It projects unshakable confidence, but beneath the surface, it is pure, unadulterated terror. The person walking through life with the largest ego is invariably the person who is easiest to destroy. They have constructed such a colossal, unrealistic image of themselves that they must exhaust all their energy defending it. To the inflated ego, every differing opinion, every lack of applause, every piece of constructive feedback is not just a comment. It is an existential threat. It is the pin approaching the balloon. This is the root of your overthinking. This is the source of the heavy pressure in your relationships. This is why your skin feels so agonizingly thin, why offense comes so easily, and why you are exhausted by the constant need for external validation. You are not a delicate flower. You are a balloon stretched to the point of agony, terrified of the wind. Today, we are going to walk through the shadows of this uncomfortable truth. We are going to examine the ego, the ancient vice of pride, that quiet voice inside you that demands to be the protagonist of reality, and which makes you so deeply unhappy precisely because reality refuses to comply. This journey will not be purely comforting. It will sting. But just as a physician must clean a festering wound before it can heal, we must confront the ego before we can find true, lasting peace. If you have the courage to look at yourself honestly, if you are willing to let ancient wisdom heal your modern exhaustion, walk with me. Let us journey back to the 5th century, to the shores of North Africa. The Roman Empire, a structure of power and civilization that humanity believed was eternal, was crumbling into dust. The old certainties were violently collapsing. In the midst of this terrifying transformation, Augustine penned a monumental work called The City of God. Within its vast pages lies a devastatingly simple observation about the human heart. He wrote that humanity is divided into 2 distinct cities, built upon 2 fundamental loves. The city of God, he argued, is constructed upon the love of God, extending even to the contempt of self. The city of man, however, is built upon the love of self, extending even to the contempt of God. These are our only 2 options. There is no middle ground, no comfortable third path. You either live centered on something infinitely greater than yourself, or you live centered entirely upon yourself. Your primary love flows outward toward the transcendent and the other, or it flows inward toward your own glorification. And here is the bitter medicine we must swallow today. The vast majority of us, regardless of what we claim, are citizens of the city of man. We do not speak of it in such stark terms, naturally. We have developed elegant, modern justifications. We speak endlessly of self-love. We talk about prioritizing ourselves, about setting boundaries, about protecting our peace. And yes, there are undeniably healthy versions of these concepts. But far too often, they are merely beautiful disguises for the oldest, most destructive form of selfishness. The toxic self-love celebrated by our modern culture is simply ancient pride wrapped in new, attractive packaging. It is the exact same obsession with the self, sold to us as personal growth and self-care. Augustine identified this pride, what he called superbia in Latin, not merely as one flaw among many, but as the absolute root of all other vices. It is the toxic seed from which all our relational pressures and psychological miseries bloom. Why? Because pride is the ultimate desire to be your own origin point. It is the deep-seated yearning to be the undisputed center of reality. It is, quite literally, the desire to be God. Think about the implications of this. The proud heart refuses to depend on anyone. It resents owing gratitude. It violently resists acknowledging that anything or anyone could possibly be greater, wiser, or more important than itself. It demands to be entirely self-sufficient, the sole source of its own value and meaning. It wants to occupy the throne of the universe. But here is the tragic, inevitable collision. The universe already has a center, and it is most certainly not you. No matter how much you inflate your ego, no matter how desperately you convince yourself of your central importance, the universe stubbornly continues its course without consulting you. Other human beings continue living their own complex lives without placing you at the forefront of their minds. Tragedies occur, weather changes, and time marches on, all without seeking your permission. The world categorically refuses to treat you as the deity you secretly believe yourself to be. And the friction between your inflated self-image and indifferent reality is what causes your pain. Every single time reality reminds you that you are not the center, you feel that agonizing prick against the balloon of your ego. Every time someone fails to grant you the precise level of importance you feel you deserve, your mind spirals into overthinking. Every time circumstances defy your desires, the ego screams in righteous indignation. Pride promises you greatness, but it delivers only extreme fragility. It promises you unyielding power, but it delivers complete enslavement to the opinions of others. It promises you happiness, but it delivers a constant, exhausting anxiety. Because maintaining the illusion that you are the center of the universe is a relentless, full-time occupation. You must remain in a state of hypervigilance, constantly scanning your environment for threats to your image. You must endlessly seek out confirmation of your worth. You must continually measure yourself against everyone around you to ensure you have not fallen behind. It is deeply exhausting, and over the span of a lifetime, it is utterly impossible to sustain. Furthermore, Augustine points out a tragic consequence of this pride. It isolates you. The ego locks you inside a suffocating prison constructed entirely of mirrors, where everywhere you look, you only see distorted reflections of yourself. Think of the most self-centered person you know. Do they possess deep, nourishing relationships? Likely not. They may have audiences, they may have admirers or enablers who give them what they demand. But a genuine relationship where two souls meet as equals, where there is mutual vulnerability, shared sacrifice, and reciprocal care, is almost impossible for the deeply proud person. Genuine connection requires you to step outside of yourself. It requires you to view the other person truly as another, not merely as a mirror designed to reflect your glory, nor as a tool to validate your existence. It requires the terrifying realization that sometimes the other person's needs are genuinely more important than your own. The ego cannot tolerate this. And so, the proud individual ends up profoundly alone. They may be surrounded by a crowd, but they remain isolated in their hall of mirrors, starving for connection while desperately clinging to the illusion of their own supremacy. Wanting to be absolutely everything, they are left with nothing. Let us transition from theory to practice. I want to offer you a mirror, a way to examine your own heart. I will outline 4 symptoms of a diseased ego. Do not use this list to diagnose your spouse, your friends, or your colleagues. Use it solely to examine yourself. The ego is a master of camouflage. It is incredibly skilled at making you believe the problem always lies with someone else. The first symptom is the one we have already touched upon, which is easy offense. If you find your skin is paper thin, if casual remarks wound you deeply, if you're constantly feeling slighted, this is not a sign of a tender heart. It is a sign of an ego so massive that everything brushes against it. A person with a healthy sense of self can endure criticism without their world collapsing. They can objectively consider that they might be wrong. They can separate their intrinsic human value from their flawed actions or ideas. The diseased ego cannot do this. To the proud, any critique of what they do is received as a mortal attack on who they are, and that is intolerable. Ask yourself, how many times this past week have I felt disrespected, undervalued, or overlooked? If the number is high, the problem is likely not a world full of disrespectful people. The problem is an ego actively hunting for reasons to feel attacked. The second symptom is the insatiable desire for control. The proud person feels a desperate need to micromanage situations, dictate the behavior of others, and guarantee specific outcomes. Deep down, they believe that if things do not unfold exactly according to their plan, it exposes a lack of power, a lack of importance. Observe your own relationship with control. Can you delegate a task and watch someone do it differently than you would without feeling a surge of anxiety? Can you accept a reality you did not choose? Or must you always have the final word, the ultimate veto, the guiding hand in every situation? This obsessive desire for control is often just ego masquerading as responsibility. It is the fear of not being essential, camouflaged behind the excuse that if you do not handle it, it will fall apart. The third symptom of a deeply rooted pride is the inability to genuinely admire others. The proud person finds it nearly impossible to rejoice in the success of another human being. When a colleague achieves something extraordinary, when a friend receives praise, the diseased ego recoils. It immediately feels the sting of envy, the sharp pang of a perceived threat, and an overwhelming need to minimize the other person's accomplishment. This toxic reaction often disguises itself in a single, devastating word. But. Yes, they are talented, but. Yes, they achieved that, but they were lucky. Yes, they did well, but I could have done it better if I possessed their advantages. This is the ego's favorite defensive mechanism against another person's excellence. It cannot simply say, that person is truly remarkable in this area, and I'm glad for them. For the ego, all of life is an agonizing competition, where someone else's victory is automatically interpreted as its own humiliating defeat. I ask you to examine your heart. When was the last time you celebrated someone else's triumph without feeling a quiet pang of resentment, without searching your mind for a way to diminish their light so yours might shine brighter? The fourth symptom, and perhaps the most insidious in our modern era, is victimhood. You might find this surprising, for we typically associate pride with arrogance, with the boastful assertion of superiority over others. But playing the victim is merely the reverse side of the very same coin of pride. It is an incredibly effective way to ensure you remain the undisputed protagonist of your own drama. The professional victim declares, "No one suffers as I do. No one's burdens are as heavy as mine. No one understands the unique depth of my pain." Do you see the mechanism at work? They are placing themselves at the absolute center of the universe once again. They have constructed an elaborate narrative where they are the tragic hero, and reality itself conspires against them. This victim mentality uses genuine or exaggerated suffering as currency to purchase attention, to evade personal responsibility, and to manipulate the sympathy of those around them. I cannot achieve this because of what they did to me. Or you simply do not understand the profound difficulty of being me. If someone attempts to gently suggest that perhaps they are not as powerless as they claim, the victim becomes furiously offended because their entire identity, their sense of specialness, is built upon the foundation of their suffering. Remove the victimhood and you remove their crown. Ask yourself with brutal honesty, how frequently do I position myself as the innocent martyr in my stories? Do I weaponize my past pain to extract concessions, sympathy, or power that I would otherwise not receive? These four signs, easy offense, the desperate need for control, the inability to admire, and chronic victimhood, are not mere personality quirks. They are the visible symptoms of a spiritual sickness. They are not moral failings for which you must mercilessly punish yourself. They are diagnoses you must acknowledge so you can finally seek the cure. And what is the cure? Augustine would tell you, unequivocally, that the cure is humility. But we must be incredibly careful here, for our modern culture has terribly misunderstood this word. Humility is not self-hatred. It is not walking around declaring yourself to be worthless garbage. That is false humility, which is simply pride disguised as self-deprecation. The person who constantly complains about their flaws is still demanding that you focus on them. They still require you to validate them, only now they seek pity instead of praise. True humility is not becoming a doormat. It is not permitting others to abuse your boundaries or silence your voice. That is not virtue. That is pathology. True humility, as Augustine understood it, is something far deeper, far more challenging, and ultimately, profoundly liberating. He called it ontological humility. Humility regarding your very existence, your true place in the grand architecture of reality. Ontological humility is very simply the courage to see the truth. It is recognizing your authentic position in the cosmos, neither infinitely larger than you are, nor insignificantly smaller, exactly what you are. And what are you? You are a creature. You did not speak yourself into existence. You did not design the complex machinery of your body. You did not choose the era of your birth. You're entirely dependent upon forces far beyond your control. The air you breathe, the sun that warms you, the heart that beats without your conscious command. You are small. But this smallness is not an insult. It is a staggering reality. In the context of an unimaginably vast cosmos, you are infinitesimal. Yet the diseased ego constantly whispers the lie that you are the central sun, that the universe owes you a debt, that your fleeting opinions require ultimate reverence. Humility is the painful, beautiful process of waking up from that absurd, exhausting dream. It is accepting the truth that you are not God. And here is the paradox that the proud ego can never grasp. When you finally accept your smallness, you become free. Think about the profound relief in this. If you are not the center of the universe, you no longer have to bear the crushing weight of maintaining it. If you are not responsible for everything, you do not have to try to control everything. If your core value is not derived from being superior to others, you can finally cease the exhausting, endless competition. Pride promises you a throne but delivers a prison cell of anxiety. Humility seems like a descent into nothingness, but it is the only path to true, lasting freedom. When you stop pretending to be more than you are, a monumental burden falls from your shoulders. You no longer need to violently defend an inflated, fragile image. You can receive criticism without shattering, because your worth is anchored in something deeper than human opinion. You can admire greatness in others without a trace of envy, because their light does not diminish yours. You can allow life to unfold without needing to micromanage every detail. Humility does not make you worthless. It makes you real. And living in reality is infinitely better than surviving as a fragile balloon, terrified of the next sharp breeze. In his intimate masterpiece, Confessions, Augustine meticulously documents his own agonizing wrestling match with the ego. Long before his transformation, he was a fiercely proud man. He possessed a brilliant intellect, and he wielded it precisely to blind others to his inner emptiness. He craved the roar of the crowd, the intoxicating validation of public approval, the illusion of supremacy. He desperately wanted to be admired, yet he found himself profoundly, inexplicably miserable. The applause he so hungrily sought was never quite loud enough. The recognition always left a hollow ache in his chest. His ambition was a bottomless pit. The more he fed his ego, the more ravenous its hunger became. His ultimate conversion was not merely an intellectual shift. It was a devastating experience of humiliation, in the truest, most liberating sense of the word. It was the moment he finally fell to his knees, utterly exhausted by his own pride, and confessed that he was not the architect of his own soul. It was the shattering realization that he desperately needed something infinitely greater than himself to sustain him. He relinquished the exhausting pretense of being the center, and from the wreckage of that humiliation bloomed a profound, unshakable peace that his towering ego had never been able to manufacture. He discovered a freedom that the relentless pursuit of human glory had actively prevented. He found a joy anchored securely in something eternal, far beyond the fickle opinions of the crowd. That is the true promise of humility. It does not diminish you. It sets you free. I want to offer you a very practical exercise today. It is incredibly simple in concept, yet deeply challenging in execution, because it directly assaults the core mechanism of the ego. The exercise is called shattering the mirror. The fundamental problem with the ego is its relentless self-obsession. It resides entirely within a hall of mirrors where every surface, every interaction, every thought only reflects its own image back to itself. The only known cure is to deliberately shatter those mirrors. You must forcefully redirect your gaze outward. The most potent, transformative way to achieve this is through the act of service, doing something intentionally for another human being from which you derive absolutely zero personal benefit. Augustine's instruction is simple. Step outside of yourself. Today, I challenge you to find one concrete way to serve someone else. Do not do it so you can feel a warm glow of self-satisfaction, although that may naturally occur. Do not do it so others will witness your benevolence and applaud your virtue, because that is merely pride masquerading as charity. Do it simply because another person has a need and you possess the capacity to meet it. It might be something remarkably small. Offer your undivided attention to someone who is desperate to be heard and aggressively resist the urge to turn the conversation back to your own experiences. Assist someone with a mundane, frustrating task they are struggling to complete alone. Give away something of value to someone who cannot possibly repay you. Dedicate a portion of your precious time to someone who cannot advance your career or boost your status. When you intentionally serve in this manner, something profound shifts within your psyche. For a brief, shining moment, you cease to be the gravitational center of your own universe. For that moment, another soul occupies the space you usually reserve for your own anxieties and ambitions. And in that precise moment, the ego is starved of its vital nourishment. The ego survives solely on the steady diet of your self-attention. It feeds on your constant worry about your image, your obsessive planning for your own benefit, your relentless defense of your perceived rights. When you deliberately redirect that intense focus outward toward the genuine well-being of another, the ego begins to wither. Not instantly, of course, but gradually, inevitably. This does not imply that you must completely ignore your own legitimate needs or transform yourself into a dysfunctional martyr. That is simply another form of self-obsession. It means you must intentionally integrate the practice of selfless service into the rhythm of your daily life. It means exercising the atrophied muscle of stepping outside yourself. The more frequently you choose to shatter the mirror, the easier it becomes, and the easier it becomes, the weaker the tyrannical grip of your ego grows. It is a beautiful, virtuous cycle that begins with a single, quiet decision. Today, I will act for the good of another. There is one final dimension of Augustine's thought that I believe is desperately crucial for our specific cultural moment. He lived, as we do, in an era of terrifying instability. In the year 410 AD, the unthinkable occurred. The city of Rome was sacked by the Visigoths. The psychological shock to the known world was unimaginable. If the eternal city could fall, the foundation of reality itself seemed to be collapsing. Many citizens instinctively blamed the Christians. They argued that Rome had fallen precisely because it had abandoned its ancient, powerful gods. They claimed that the Christian virtues of humility, meekness, and the rejection of worldly glory had fundamentally weakened the empire's martial spirit. Augustine wrote The City of God largely to dismantle these accusations. But his response was far more profound than a mere defensive argument. He offered a sweeping analysis of why civilizations and the individuals within them ultimately collapse. His central diagnosis was unflinching. The root cause of Rome's destruction was its suffocating pride. Rome did not fall because it lacked pride. It fell because it was intoxicated by an excess of it. It collapsed under the crushing weight of its own arrogance. It had placed its absolute trust in its own magnificent achievements, its military supremacy, its own self-generated glory. And when the illusion of that invincibility was shattered, there was absolutely nothing solid left to sustain it. Augustine understood that pride is not merely a private psychological struggle. It is a fatal civilizational disease. Any society and any individual life constructed entirely upon the foundation of self-love, self-exaltation, and the relentless pursuit of human power is destined for catastrophic failure because it is built upon shifting sand. Does this sound uncomfortably familiar? We are currently living in an era that idolizes the ego to a degree unprecedented in human history. The cultural mandate is clear. You must be the protagonist. You must be an influencer. You must be endlessly unique, special, and the undisputed center of attention. We have constructed vast digital architectures, social media platforms that function as highly sophisticated ego-feeding machines. They are meticulously designed to inject us with constant micro-doses of validation through likes, comments, and follower counts. Yet, simultaneously, we are drowning in an epidemic of profound anxiety, crippling depression, and agonizing loneliness. The more obsessively we focus on ourselves, the more miserable we become. The more we inflate our digital avatars, the more fragile our actual psyches grow. The more desperately we strive to prove we are special, the more profoundly empty we feel inside. Augustine would not be shocked by our current crisis. He would calmly observe that we are reaping exactly what he predicted. The city of man, built upon the foundation of self-worship, invariably produces misery. Not because it is inherently wrong to love things, but because loving yourself as the supreme, ultimate good is a crushing burden you are never designed to bear. The ego simply cannot deliver the promises it makes. It cannot grant you deep security because your self-image will always be vulnerable to attack. It cannot offer you lasting peace because it will always demand a higher dose of validation. It cannot provide true happiness because happiness predicated on being superior to others is a cruel, unwinnable game. It is only when you dare to love something vastly larger than yourself, when you bravely step out of the hall of mirrors, when you humbly accept your true place in a grander order, that you finally discover the profound peace the ego falsely promised. I want to address a resistance that is likely rising within you right now. You might be thinking, but wait, a healthy ego is absolutely necessary for survival in this world. I need to value myself. I need confidence to succeed. If I don't prioritize my own needs, absolutely no one else will. And there is undeniable truth in that instinct. I'm not advocating for psychological self-annihilation. I'm not suggesting that you should possess no sense of your own inherent worth or that you should actively seek to be humiliated by others. But we must draw a razor-sharp distinction between genuine, healthy self-love and the diseased, inflated ego. The difference is precisely what Augustine pointed out so brilliantly centuries ago. Healthy self-love recognizes your profound, unshakable value as a human being, but it does not require you to artificially inflate that value to feel secure. You can intimately know your own worth without needing the entire room to constantly confirm it. You can fiercely respect your own boundaries without needing to belittle those around you. You can deeply care for your own well-being without demanding to be the center of the universe. The diseased ego, in stark contrast, is a bottomless pit. It is never satisfied. It requires a constant, exhausting stream of external validation, praise, and definitive proof that you are uniquely special. It is perpetually restless, forever scanning the horizon for the next fix of approval. Here is a very simple diagnostic test for your own heart. Can you sit in absolute peace when no one is applauding you? Can you deeply feel your own intrinsic value even when nobody is actively affirming it? Can you face sharp, even unfair criticism without completely shattering or launching a vicious counterattack? If you can honestly answer yes to these questions, you likely possess a genuinely healthy sense of self-love. If the answer is no, you are likely suffering from a diseased ego that has expertly disguised itself as self-care. And here is the beautiful, profound irony of the human condition. Genuine self-love is born exclusively from humility, never from pride. It is only when you finally accept your true, unvarnished place in reality, when you cease the exhausting performance of pretending to be more than you are, that you can finally appreciate yourself for who you actually are. Without the elaborate costumes, without the desperate pretensions, without the agonizing need to constantly compare your life to the highlight reels of others. The proud person does not actually love themselves. They are passionately in love with a highly curated, deeply fragile image of themselves, and they live in absolute terror that this delicate balloon will be popped by reality. That is not love. That is a state of perpetual enslavement to a phantom. The truly humble person can love themselves because they actually know themselves. They clearly see their own profound strengths and their glaring weaknesses. They understand their exact place in the grand scheme of things. They do not need to be more than they are because they have finally accepted what they are. And from that solid ground of acceptance, they can build a life of genuine substance. We are drawing to a close, and I want to distill the essence of what we have explored today. Saint Augustine, in his profound wisdom, revealed that we are always choosing between two cities, two fundamental ways of existing in this world. The city of God is a life built upon the love of something infinitely greater than ourselves. The city of man is a life constructed entirely upon the obsessive love of self. The city of man makes grand promises. It promises you greatness, but it delivers only the painful swelling of an inflated ego. It promises you ultimate freedom, but it delivers crushing slavery to the opinions of others. It promises you lasting happiness, but it delivers a constant, vibrating anxiety about maintaining your fragile self-image. Pride is the poisonous root of this existence. It is the desperate desire to be your own origin, your own center, your own God. And it is the hidden source of so much of the relational friction and psychological misery we endure daily. We examined the symptoms of this spiritual sickness, the tendency to be easily offended, the insatiable need to control outcomes, the bitter inability to genuinely admire the success of others, and the toxic comfort of playing the victim. If you recognize these symptoms within your own heart today, I urge you, do not condemn yourself. Acknowledge them bravely so that the healing work can finally begin. The cure, as we discussed, is ontological humility. Not the destructive practice of self-hatred, but the liberating, realistic recognition of your true place in the cosmos. You did not create yourself. You are not the center of reality. Accepting this truth is the only way to free yourself from the impossible, exhausting burden of pretending to be God. Practically, this healing is achieved by intentionally stepping outside of yourself. It is found in the quiet, uncelebrated acts of serving others. It is the daily practice of shattering the mirrors of your own ego and turning your gaze outward toward the world. The choice stands before you, right now, as it does in every waking moment of your life. Which city will you inhabit today? Will you choose to pump more air into the fragile balloon of your ego, or will you have the courage to begin letting it deflate? Will you remain safely locked in the suffocating prison of mirrors, or will you choose to break them? I want to leave you with one final, practical reflection. The very next time you feel that familiar, burning sensation of offense rising in your chest, the next time you feel a surge of entitlement, convinced that the world owes you something, the next time someone fails to offer you the exact recognition you feel you deserve, I want you to pause. Take a deep breath and ask yourself a brutally honest question. Is this situation actually attacking my core being, or is it merely my inflated ego feeling threatened? Because the vast majority of the time, the truth is that no one is actually attacking you. The universe is not actively conspiring against your happiness. People are not spending their days meticulously plotting your downfall. It is simply your ego interpreting every slight, every disagreement, every lack of applause as a mortal threat. It is your ego that demands a constant, exhausting defense. It is your ego that forces you to live in a state of perpetual, anxious alert. But you have the power to choose not to listen to that voice. You can choose to perceive reality as it actually is, rather than how your terrified ego distorts it. You can choose the profound, quiet freedom of not needing to defend an illusion. Stop defending yourself so fiercely. You are not under attack. It is only your ego that is afraid of the dark. And when that ego finally ceases its frantic, fearful pacing, something truly miraculous occurs. You can finally breathe. You can relate to others without an agenda. You can love without demanding a return on investment. You can receive criticism without crumbling. You can give freely. You can simply be without the crushing, suffocating weight of maintaining a persona that was never real to begin with. This is the profound liberation that Augustine discovered when he finally abandoned his desperate pursuit of human glory and surrendered to something infinitely deeper. This exact same freedom is available to you right now if you only possess the courage to let go of the balloon. The gates to the city of God are standing wide open. The admission is entirely free. The only absolute requirement to enter is that you must leave your ego at the door. Are you ready to step inside? If this message challenged you today, if it stirred something deep within your conscience, or even if it deeply irritated you, it is highly likely that this was precisely what you needed to hear. Share this video with someone else who might be carrying the heavy burden of their own pride. Do not share it from a place of moral superiority saying, "Look at what you need to fix," but rather as a genuine gift, a piece of truth that helped lighten your own load. And remember always, your most dangerous enemy does not reside out there in the world. It resides quietly within your own heart. But the incredible power to defeat it resides there as well.